I'm worried about this very specific review. I loved this book so much that I thought of the best way to make a review. I thought of writing it. I thought of reading the stories in it out loud. I thought of doing a podcast. And even up until a couple of moments ago, I was still thinking that I need to do more preparation. But I can't anymore. This book is a culmination of hard work, heart, and people who believe in the African literary scene. And this book is very personal to me. In this video, I'm going to be doing a review of this book. Limbe to Lagos, non-fiction from Nigeria and Cameroon, and edited by Dami Ajayi, Emmanuel Iduma, and my friend Zekashu Magviban. And in this collection, this anthology, you have stories from people that I know personally, people that I met. Every single one of these people somehow is related to me. So two fair warnings here. One, they're going to be spoilers because I'm going to be reading parts of the stories, not all of them, so don't hold your horses, not all the stories, but I'm going to be reading enough for you to get an idea of what the story is about. Secondly, I am biased. I know the writers, I know the editors. I was there for a huge part, actually there's a small part, of the reading that took place in Iyaboya, where I used to work at the time when the writers from Cameroon and Nigeria visited to have the first official reading on Cameroon soil. Watching this project emerge from a conversation between Emmanuel Iduma, Zekashu Magviban, Dami Ajayi, and Safura Balogun up to this point where you actually have a physical manifestation of this dream. It's a big deal to me. And in the next couple of minutes, if you do let me, I'm going to give you a reason why you should get a copy of this book and also why you should watch out for all these writers in this anthology. Are you ready? Well, let's do this. Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Kamga and I'm a husband, writer, and poet. On this channel, I make videos for people like you, creatives who want to be able to use their art, make some side income, or probably build a whole business out of it. And if you're interested in tutorials, book recommendations, and any other aspects of tools that creatives in the digital age use, then you've come to the right place. So if you haven't subscribed, well, you should. All right, cool. Well, welcome. Let's talk about Limbe to Lagos, non-fiction from Cameroon and Nigeria. This is a culmination of 3 years, I think 2015, 16, 17, and I believe it was published in 2018. I hope I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, please let me know. Mark, if you're watching this, correct me. And I want to give you a little roundup of how this book came to be. So, Saraba Magazine got funding from, I believe, the Goethe Institute, Mass Mullen? I don't remember. I don't want to check right now. But it got funding to actually push out and get writers in Nigeria to write non-fiction and fiction stories. And to actually get this full story and the real one, you either read the introduction in the book or you watch a link to the video I'm going to put right here about Emmanuel Iduma explaining the origin of the book. So this is me just chopping it off so that I can get to the book, the meat of this video. So they got funding to do this collaboration and put out a call for writers. They found out that they actually had more fiction submissions than, non-fiction submissions. And that was probably 2015, I believe. And it was a surprise to them that people were not engaging in it. So they actually did, a newer call, a much more specific call, and asked for pitches instead of full stories, which was a little bit better at the time. And they found like 5 or more of those stories. So eventually, Emmanuel Iduma, who is part of Saraba Magazine, I hope I'm right, together with Dami Ajayi and Safura Balogun, these are 3 members, core founders, I believe, members of Saraba Magazine. At this point in this particular review, I'm like, if you're watching this and you're, what, do you even know what you're talking about? Guess what? I don't. But just hold on, I'm getting there. Those were Saraba Magazine's members, together with Zekashu Magviban, because he's always working with the Goethe Institute in Cameroon and Nigeria. They, probably over a couple of drinks and, some very bad decision making, decided to do this thing where writers from Nigeria and Cameroon were going to, move to each other's country, do a workshop to actually help increase the scope of non-fiction writing. And that's how the Limbe Lagos Exchange Program was born. Funding came in from, I believe, the Goethe Institute as well. And I had the opportunity to meet a lot of these people from Nigeria, and actually my friends, Howard MB Maximus, Kecha Atemken, whose story is here as well, was also part of the program. I actually have the names here. So there's Adams Adeosun from Nigeria, Afope Ojo, Nigeria, Caleb Ajinomo, Nigeria, Godwin Luba from Cameroon, Howard MB Maximus from Cameroon, Lucia Adao Fioka from Nigeria, Kecha Atemken from Nigeria. I almost said from Nigeria. Kecha Atemken from Cameroon, Raoul Jimeli from Cameroon, Sada Malumfashi from Nigeria, and Socrates Mbamalu from Nigeria. These people came together, and I think it was a 3-week workshop, I believe. They came to Limbe, stayed at the hotel there where we got the reading at IA. They also moved to Nigeria where they finished the workshop, and eventually, this, what you see right here is the culmination of years of writing, of work. And I just have to say upfront that these guys, Dami, Emmanuel, and Zekashu, the work they did, the layout, I mean, not the layout of the book itself, the way the stories were organized. And now I just have this feeling that it was a very difficult task to do, to tell these stories the way they did, to actually pick which one is going to be the first story, which will be the last, where do we put what about the titles? Because if you watch the workshop, the panel that the writers had at Ake Festival, you would hear from the writers themselves about why they chose to write what they wrote and a bunch of answers about the questions. So I really enjoyed that video, and I'm going to be talking about some of the aspects that I saw in that particular video. How am I going to structure this review? I don't even know if I should call it a review, because it's more of a fanboy ranting about what he liked and what he didn't like in the book. And I discovered that actually nobody had done a review of this book, which I felt was a shame. I feel like the work that Bakwa and Saraba are doing, and these are just like 2 out of the hundreds of magazines on the African continent to portray literary forces, upcoming forces. I think we need to use the internet more to tell these stories. But I don't want to go into that direction right now. I could get very passionate about why we're not using the internet tools to do what we need to do. And let's just go to the story. So here's how I'm going to structure the review. I'm going to go through every single story, read a little bit about it, and tell you what I liked about the story. Of course, I'll tell you the story that I prefer the most. Hint, hint, Sada, hint, hint. And I'll tell you the story that I didn't like and why I didn't like it. But before I actually even tell you about why I didn't like any story, let me say this. As a writer, I know how hard it is to actually pen anything. Like, I haven't published a book. That's one thing that always keeps my mind. I haven't published anything yet to even get up and tell anybody you're not a good enough writer or your story sucks. So when I say I don't like a story, I make it very subjective to who I am as a person and what I'm looking for in a story. And in this particular context, I feel the reason why some of the stories did not strike a chord with me was because of the other stories in the collection. I don't know if that makes sense. Because there were other stories that I really fell in love with, stories that made me cry. I finish reading the story and I go to the next story and I'm like, I don't feel that much, but within a context, a story can be extremely powerful, and in another context, it can be the weakest thing you can ever find. So if at any point I offend you, dear writer, in any of your pieces by saying that I don't like a story, remember this is just one man's opinion. I am not a literary agent, and I am not any authority of any sort. I like reading, I love what you're doing, and I have the right to give my opinion. So if you're still here by now, then I guess we're on the same page. Let's just jump straight into the review. Bukola's voice reminded me to listen to what she had to say while we walked towards 250 LT a day before we competed in a speech contest. You walked behind us with Oyin, Bukola's 8-year-old daughter. You were silent and distant. We would compete in teams of 2. You would be Bukola's partner. I would speak twice because the pretty girl in my team had developed cold feet. The Faculty of Management Sciences that you represented would come second. You would disappear then, only to reappear 8 days later, on matriculation day before flitting out again. I Call Her Beloved by Adams Adeosun. I actually like this story. It just brought back all the memories again, and it's difficult to talk about this story without telling you how painful it was to finish reading it. The way he expressed the ideas behind the writing at the Ake Festival, I could feel the honesty in the piece. It's one thing that cuts across, one thing that I feel cuts across a lot of the stories here is the truth. I think that's what attracts me personally to nonfiction, which is the fact that it's difficult to lie in a way that is so blatant. A lot of the recollections might not be exactly the way we think because we are recollecting just our memories. But Caleb does and tells a story about someone that he cared about, someone that he still cares about, in a way that captures your attention and makes you think about the people that you care about. And it's a very painful story. It's all I can say without spoiling it or telling you exactly what happened, because I don't want to take that opportunity from you. It was a cathartic experience to read this story and get to the end, to feel pain, to feel someone going through a moment in the past and wishing things were different. I met Caleb once, actually Adams. I met Adams barely. And this story enabled me to discover the kind of writer that he was in a way that I don't think I could have done in a conversation. And even when you hear him read the story at the festival, the Ake Festival, the panel that they had, there is something about letting the words come to you that I believe everybody should experience. I Lost Your Key because I was lost in a book about keys. It was a collection of short stories. Everything pointed to keys. Losing them, finding them, keys in the ways you and I are yet to think about them. I almost said, "No, you keep them," when you gave me the key, but I shoved the words back in my throat because we just made up from a fight about the thing we always fought about, not meeting you halfway. The story is titled "Tough Locks Do Not Easily Come Undone" by Afope Ojo. This story connected with me because she, for some reason, was able to paint an image that I could connect with at the time before I moved to the US. About someone that you miss, about moments in time, about things that happen that you wish you could tell somebody who the person is not there anymore. And it's the way the story revolves around this very simple thing. Keys. Like, it's the way the whole narrative is wrapped around an event and how she ties in all these other aspects that pull things around it. I loved it. And I think that I wonder if this is the first time that she's writing this kind of story, and I wonder what it would be like for her to write a full story centered around this idea. I was reading, I think it was Helen Oyeyemi's short story collection, What's Not Yours Is Not Yours, which is still something around locks and keys, all stories themed around the particular area. And I wonder if Afope could pull something like that. That could be something that I think I would like to read. Yeah. It was a dusty afternoon. Sun-yellowed leaves waved in the November harmattan. The wind howled, lips split and skins cracked in response. People shook whitened hands with less vigor, scratched body sores with less rigor, and carried little bottles of ointment to keep their skin safe. In this weather, minor injuries were aggravated. When Grace was not running or hurting her knees, she was peeling her own flesh. I took the big Vaseline from the toilet cabinet in my sister's room. I hid it in an empty cereal box, a ready excuse should an adult in the house accost me. "Going to throw this out," I would have volunteered. But nobody saw me leave. Caleb Ajinamo wrote this story titled, "I'd rather be hard to love than easy to leave." This story, Caleb was able to make me care about something I shouldn't be caring about. And it's my second best story in this collection because of how human the story is. The idea and the person he writes about is someone that you would never believe is possible for any person to care for. And also the aspects, the human aspects that tend from love to rejection to miscomprehension to guilt. There are things, so many things that he brings up writing about this person that I could see in a new light. In my opinion, Caleb was able to give me a reason to care about something that I shouldn't. And I think that's the powerful thing about writing, about new ideas and new people telling you things that you never thought about, being able to change your mind about things, being able to experience a new perspective from a different angle. And this story, I'd rather be hard to love than easy to live, ends in a tone that makes you think about all the things that you did differently, all the things that you can improve in your life. Not in the self-improvement, like self-development, but more in like reflecting on your own life and some of the mistakes that you made, the things that you wish you had done, and how you can now do them differently. So it's almost as though Caleb is providing you with a part of his life to let you know, like, hey, listen, this happened to me. Don't let it happen to you. And that's what I really liked about this particular piece. Comment did not say much about Koto prior to this trip. So I was on an expedition into unknown territory. He talked about wood, certain I would get roofing wood in Koto, even the small leaf species. I did not believe him, cautious not to be hooked onto deceit. Sometimes, wood brokers gave spurious leads for selfish interests. Later, I confirmed his information. We sourced wood in Koto, but I did not lose sight of happenstances in the community, some of the memories which lingered for a while. The story is titled, A Trip to Koto by Godwin Luba. I told you I was going to tell you the story I didn't like. This is it. But let me tell you what I liked about this story. Of all the pieces that were put in together in this collection, there was a vast array of the personalities of the writers that popped up. And because I'd met some of these people, I could read with their voices in their minds, and I could read with Godwin's voice. And Godwin is a serious man. Like, when I say serious, it's not like he doesn't crack a joke. I did not particularly enjoy this story because I could not relate to it. It was a nice narrative, it took me to a different world, but like most stories or books that I don't continue or I don't finish, it's more like, alright, this is a good book, but it's not for me. That's the way I felt about this story. But for someone who's trying to understand the Cameroonian landscape, delving more into what it feels like to actually be in the remote areas, and someone who wants to get An aspect of living in community that most people would never see on TV. This story had it. Like, there's one particular scene where he's talking about the community doctor, the guy who sells medication and who makes money from selling probably expired medication. This is Cameroon. Like Sasselu, Cameroon. This is what the community that we don't see on the internet feels like. And that was something about this story that I really admired and respected. The ability to bring this picture of a community that I probably haven't even visited, but I know exists. I like that about his writing. Maybe the flourishing aspect of it and the way I relate to stories about painting images and eliciting emotions, I didn't have that. So I thought it was my least favorite story of all of them. On my 5th birthday, the year we moved to Mile 4, my dad got me a new bicycle, and the bicycle got me a new friend. Every morning, tea was at our gate. Breakfast in hand, he would call on me to come with my bicycle so we would go for a ride. For a few months, we met every morning in front of our house, riding and falling around our stony yard until one day, the bicycle decided it was tired of our religious mountings and broke itself down. My mom gathered its pieces and parked them in the store. In Mile 4, people stand haphazardly like children at the amusement park, some standing tall, some lying on their bellies, some naked, while others face each other making jokes or preparing for a fight. They stand haphazardly like a lazy farmer had, in a hurry, scattered house seeds on his land. And now every house sprouted and grew the way it knew how. Shanties near bungalows, near mansions, near shanties. Sometimes you had to squeeze through someone's kitchen to get to your front door. And since T's house was on one of the houses in conversation with ours, our friendship did not break down with the bicycle. Today I'm Riding Alone by Howard M.B. Maximus. Just thinking about this story, I'm getting chills right now because I knew about this story before it was written. Howard once performed a poem that had tea in it. And I cried. Like, I literally, in the hall while he was performing, I was crying because of how raw and honest and authentic his poetry was. And this story allowed me to have a bigger picture of what tea was for Howard. Because the title says it all, and I don't want to spoil it for you because it says, like, today I'm riding alone, and it starts with this bicycle scene. So you can almost anticipate what is about to happen in the story. But it's not even what happens, but how it happens that makes it much more painful. It's a story about immigration, a story about friendship, a story about family, a story about childhood memories, a story about what it means to lose a friend. And I think Howard's humanity cuts through the page in a way that only makes me feel more proud to even know him as a person. There's so much about the writers that people fail to look and see that, yeah, we love writing, we love telling these stories, but in these stories, we process the world. And in Today I'm Riding Alone, I wonder if actually Howard processed the world, if he was able to say what he had to say. And it's one of those things that I don't think there's ever a full, like, yeah, I did it, or no, I didn't. It's more of a process of every day you work at it, you find new ways. Sometimes it's a poem, sometimes it's a story, sometimes it's just a random conversation. Sometimes it's a draft folder in your computer that you just keep. But with Today I'm Riding Alone, Howard was able to give me that feeling that I always look for in stories. And I liked it. A decade ago, I traveled from Warri to Lagos with 50 other students from my secondary school. On our way to the summer camp in Badagry, our teacher showed us the variations in the vegetation. Note how the trees become taller, the forests less dense as we go west, she said, and I kept my 14-year-old eyes glued to the window pane, watching thick short palm trees sitting on dark soil make way for tall lean trees in red earth. I made a mental note to tell my daddy about it. A decade later, I traveled this road again. I have no mental notes made for my daddy. No imagined scenarios, no conversations, only anxiety and excitement that knot in my stomach. I got off the bus at PTI Park in Warri. The air is cooler. The blue of taxis and commercial buses and tricycles calmer than the flashy yellow of Lagos commercial vehicles. A middle-aged man walked towards me and asked, "Taxi?" "Yes," I replied. He took my suitcase and pointed towards his car parked in a line of ash-colored Peugeot cars. Story title, Daddy, by Lucia Edafioka. Nonfiction has a way of painting an image of a world that you didn't know you existed in. That's what Lucia does with this story. It's that almost it's not, I don't want to consider it a strange relationship. It's more of relationships between parents in the African continent, and I know that because I'm African. It's it's so much more different from what people realize, and relationships even within families is a little more different. So, for example, I come from a home where I talk a lot with my dad about things now. And even now, there's certain topics that I am aware of might require prepping and, a heads up and spoiler alert before I bring them up. And same for him. When he wants to talk to me about certain things, he has to let me know, like, this is why it's coming up. And in this story, Lucia talks, she does a lot of, not even a lot, like some flashbacks and forwards between where she was, how she saw her father, and how she sees him now, where she saw her family and how she sees them. And it's so human. It's one thing that cuts across a lot of these stories. Like, there's the humanity aspect of it, of people just trying to be happy. People just wanting the best for themselves and the people they care about. And then meeting these circumstances that just come up because people are people. And in Daddy, Lucia talks about that relationship and how it's changed, how it's become something that she never thought it would be, how it's become this thing that she doesn't look forward to sometimes. And sometimes she's the best thing in the world. Sometimes it makes her feel more powerful, more present, more in tune with who she is as a daughter, as a sister, as a child, and probably as a woman. And for almost every single writer here, when I read this small aspect of their story, and I'm like, what would a novel look like for these people? What would a collection of stories look like? Yeah. Daddy was nice. Wasn't my favorite. Wasn't my least favorite. But I felt connected because of that relationship that parents and kids have, especially from an African context. November 1st, 1971. The white Boeing 737-200 plane with red stripes and green markings taxied on the runway and took off, ascending obliquely into the clouds. Its attention-seeking sound made the children of Douala rush out of their homes to catch a glimpse. Adults also appeared in the streets of Douala, eyes glued to the skies, pointing with quivering fingers. Airport personnel, government officials, guests and journalists at the Aéroport International de Douala watched the plane anxiously. Everybody basked in the marvel of Cameroon Airlines' maiden flight. The plane roared over their heads as it made its way to Yaoundé for the very first time. The whole of Cameroon flew into the sky that day. The grey-haired Swiss sports supervisor of the Douala International Airport, Jareth Michel Aimé, fondly remembers the incident from a lost African magazine he had read as he stood at the documents check control point, Docs Check 2, in front of gate A22 after verifying all the passenger visas and travel documents on a South African Airways flight. Happy chants of "Cameroon Oboso! Cameroon Oboso!" filled the air. Children sang songs reserved for airplane sightings. Adults waved at it, praying for a safe landing. Many wished they had boarded the plane. In different Cameroonian towns, people listened to radio commentary from journalists stationed at the Douala and Yaoundé airports. The plane had disappeared from view in Douala. That's all this story, Impossible n'est pas camerounais, by Kiacha Atemken. I made some comments when I was reading the story, like things like, okay, this is so Kiacha. This is like something only Kiacha would say. One of them is, so somewhere around page 140, Kiacha says, they paraded their white planes with red and green stripes and their K-tails like kangaroos, stepping, taxiing, hopping, and taking giant leaps into space in Neil Armstrong boastfulness. I was like, this is Kiacha. Only Kiacha can write this kind of sentences. That's the powerful thing about this story that I think made me like it. And I actually was surprised because, honestly, I think Kiacha is also another serious writer that I personally don't really connect with, together with Godwin. And even though we're friends, there's something about his writing that I'm like, all right, I don't think I'm your audience. You're great with words, you're good at what you do. Clearly, you know what you're doing, but it's not for me. But this story was different. because Kiacha chose to take himself out of the story. I read a review on Goodreads. Somebody was saying that, she wished he had done it differently. He said he wanted to take himself out. And he actually even explains this in the workshop video from the Ake Festival if you watch the panel. The link is in the description and it's also in the card. You can check it out. I really liked him just letting me explore the history of Cameroon Airlines. And it starts in 1971. Some people will say it's not long ago because, my parents were born before that time. And they'll probably tell you they can probably remember what it was like. But what actually strikes me with this story, and that would strike you, maybe especially Cameroonians, is how much this was a big deal. And when you look at what it is now, you cannot help but wonder what happened. What the hell happened to Cameroon Airlines? Like, how did we get to this point where this massive monumental experience that could have changed the course of our aviation story and industry as a whole has become almost an insult to us? It's barely, in my opinion, barely standing. Yeah, it works, and so people are okay with it. But when you read and understand how it was before now, where it should have been advanced, it doesn't make sense to me. And that's what I liked about this piece. It was very journalistic. I actually told Kiacha when I read it, I was like, I like how he did the journalism in it, but I wish he would have put his sources. That's one thing that the person who also gave the review about how Kiacha took himself out of the story said, that when you read the story, you don't exactly know who actually said what. Like, is it Kiacha saying, where did he get his information from? Because the thing is, Kiacha worked at the airport for a while. He did have some experience with aviation and, the history of that. But when you're writing this kind of piece, when you're writing a journalistic piece, and non-fiction one especially, and it's not, your life and your story, there's something about putting your sources in that makes it different, which he did some, but I feel like it was a lot more, like 80% of it was just narration and then maybe 10% sources. And I don't know how would have balanced it better, because clearly he did his best putting it here. But I have a feeling that he's probably going to write better than this and keep going only upward from here. So, yeah. Impossible Cameroon is a good place to learn more about the politics that really played a role in the creation of Cameroon's aviation industry and what really happened when we were not here. I'm a 90s kid, so I wasn't there, and it was a good way to find that out. I grew up in Baleveng, where the soil is red and muddy in the rainy season. I was born in 1993, the last child of a big family. My father got married to one wife and inherited two others from his father. My mother is the second. I grew up very far from town, but now I live in Yaoundé, in a brothel, at the center of the city. The most vivid memories of my childhood have faded over the years. What I remember most are the hoops, the dogs, and my father's anger in my first years at school. Like many children of my generation, I grew up between my mother's kitchen and my grandfather's yard. It was a calm place, surrounded by plantain trees, short green firs, acid guava trees, and many other types of trees. My father worked for Cameroon Development Corporation, CDC, a company that produces and exports cash crops including tea. Father used to come home from their laboratories with rejected species of plants. Unlike his friends, my father worked for the whites. He always tried to be different. When I was a child, he had a bicycle. He called it Mbasuku. In Yemba, it means a home for school. He used to leave the house in the afternoon and return the next morning. Whenever he crossed the Nchubo of the neighboring houses, he sounded his horn and people could hear a kring, kring, kring sound from the iron box located in the middle of the handlebar. Childhood Memories by Raoul Jimeli. What stood out for me about this particular piece was something that I don't think is a good thing. The question I have, which I still haven't had an answer, and if you're watching this, Mark, let me know. I felt like this story was translated from French to English. And I hope I'm wrong. Because I know Raoul is predominantly a French writer. He actually published a collection recently. Because I read both French and English, I find it harder to read French. I could feel the lack of structure in the sense of it being translated. So there are two things. Either A, Raoul thinks in French and writes in English, which would explain why some of the structure didn't come out, or why when I translated it back to French, I felt a much more fluid feeling. Or he wrote in French and then the work was translated to English. Those are the two options that I'm thinking about. And if both of those are wrong, then I really have to consider my abilities to identify translated material. One other thing that you will find out in the video from the panel on the Ake Festival was that Raul was asked a question about his story, because he writes about his father, writes about how hard it was for him in childhood, and really difficult conversations that he takes with some humor and things that would make you realize that some people really went through a really hard time as kids in Cameroon. So they asked him the question like, okay, Raul, you've written about your dad, you write all these really, powerful truths about where you grew up. Aren't you scared that your dad is going to find this out someday? And if you watch the video, Raul says, well, I didn't have a problem writing about my dad because he doesn't read English. And the way he said it, I was like, man, that's chapeau. Like, hey, he's never going to find out, so why bother? And so you can imagine what is in this story. The kinds of things that he says about growing up in the house that he grew up in, a polygamous home. And what stood out for me a lot in this story was how strong his mother was. Strong in the typical African way of not letting anything go when it comes to her child. And that was very inspirational in a way that showed me that you don't need to be educated or literate to know what is good for a kid. You don't need to have all this information on the internet and watch tutorials to be a good parent, to fight for your child and what your child wants. That when you read it, you probably get it. This is my favorite story. I'm going to read longer than I read the other ones because I love this piece so much. I had to read it twice. And of all the pieces in here, this really made me smile. This is not a train ride I expected. In 2015, I boarded a 1-hour plane from Kaduna to Lagos, and then took a taxi for another hour to Abeokuta to attend the Ake Arts and Book Festival. A year later, on board a train, this same journey would take me about 40 hours to cover. 40 hours bundled with tubers of yams, sweaty bodies, and passengers hanging throughout the journey, while flanked by 2 other writers without whom I would have abandoned the mission halfway. The train station is a vast space bathing under the sun of Kaduna. There are 2 platforms. One is for the interstate train travel from Zaria to Kafachan. The other, which we are to wait for, is the interstate train that will move from Kaduna to Minna, Mokwa, Jeba, Ilorin, Ilisha, Ibadan, and Abeokuta, with a final stop at Lagos. 2 days earlier, I had been at the train station to inquire about our journey. Then it was a ghost of the hubbub I meet now. The interior of the train looked like a cinema hall without chairs, just a sparse hall with a huge board. On the blackboard, the various destinations the train traversed were written with a white chalk. I could see names of towns, letters and numbers, but could not make sense out of it. I moved around through a pathway, calling, listening for movement. I saw silhouettes of a man in a dark room, a face only visible in a slit through a window. "Good morning," I greeted him. He grunts an answer. "Sorry, please, I'm inquiring about a train journey to Abeokuta." The man did not bother to look towards me as he kept shuffling what seemed to be piles of paperwork on the desk. "Please, when does it leave?" I added again, getting impatient. "Go and look at the board," he grumbled again without raising his head up. "That's the problem. I don't understand anything written on it." My forceful voice, laden with irritation, seemed to be a language he understood. He raised his head up for the first time. He looked to be in his 50s, his eyes sunken and red in their sockets behind clear spectacles. His facial muscles appeared to have forgotten the effect of a smile a long while ago. "The train leaves every Monday by 2 p.m. He answered back, interjecting my thoughts. "Thank you," I said with a smile and turned to leave, but I heard his voice again and I took a step forward, out of the corridor. "Where is your last stop?" I turned back in my stride to answer. "Abeokuta." His face is still expressionless, his eyes fixed to the papers on the table. "The fare is 2,700 naira. You should be here before 2 p.m. to book your ticket. The train leaves by 2 p.m. every Monday and returns from Lagos by 9 a.m. every Friday." "Thank you very much," I replied, but he had already turned to his pile of papers. Out of the Window of a Train by Sada Malumfashi. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the most beautiful piece of writing I have read in a long time. I found this piece entertaining, funny, evocative, painting pictures, emotional, and very, very powerful in a way that allowed me to capture this full journey at its maximum. There's another scene that I liked, one that stood out for me that really, let me just find it. Let me just, 1 second. This is it. This is page 173 and it's already part of the journey. So the picture is, they're stuck there, they've been going there for a couple of days and they're meeting people, talk about others. And this is a part, so Sada has a camera and here we go. I tilt the camera headlong and photograph the train taking a bend on the track so that our coach is in direct view of another part of the train. It's a long train, each coach attached to another like marching soldiers. I take a snapshot and the image cut makes me turn back to my seat. I pass the camera to Anselm in his window seat. "You have to take these shots outside," I whisper. He refocuses the lens through the window and clicks, clicks, clicks. I hear the shutter sounds but my eyes already had a glimpse and my mind processes the images. He returns the camera into the coach and we consider the images. Outside, just above us on all the coaches, there are masses of humans standing, sitting, squatting and lying down on top of the train like daredevils. They improvise risky positions and create their open air coaches just above us, as if reminiscing old Bollywood movies. We are riding, they are flying. I don't know what else to tell you. This is just part of the story. This is just one, barely 2 paragraphs in this piece. I'm like, Jesus, how could somebody write so well? See, for you maybe it's nothing. It's like, you know what, that's nothing. I've seen War, I've seen Shakespeare, I've seen all these people. But to me, this story amongst this context, coming from somebody like Sada, who is both a pharmacist and a writer. Like he's been writing for a while. Like this is not like, oh, this is the first time Sada is doing this and it's surprising. I'm not surprised by Sada's writing, but I'd never actually come close to this much in his writing. And for me to experience this so privately, somebody who sees the world in a way that is very similar to the way I do. Like I have moments where I sit and look at things and I see things that most people will be like, that's just dumb, that's stupid. Not only does he see them, he photographs them and he writes about them in a way that makes me see them. I don't know what else to say about this particular story. If anything, if this was the only story that was in this book stretched out, I would buy the book, I would read it. Like, dude, I love this piece so much, and the honesty, the pictures, it's just so powerful. I think every single writer in this collection stands capable of writing a collection by themselves. And that's what makes me so proud about this book. Like the ability for them to have done through this work for years and come up with something like this. This is beautiful. My father's perfume is strong and fiery. Long after he leaves the house, his perfume lingers as if he left it to watch what we would do when he's not around. There's no day he has not worn a perfume. All his clothes are laden with it, his skin too. When my father was in the house, his presence was stifling. My brother and I would stay in our room. Whenever he had an occasion, we would wait for him to leave the house. I craved his absence, not in the form of death, nor a permanent absence, but the sort of absence that allowed me to do as I pleased. Sometimes, when he was dressing to go out, I'd be in his room. I'd watch how he'd knot his tie, his shoelace, how he'd take perfume and spray it on his wrists, the nape of his neck and at the back of his ears, carefully. While my dad dressed up, I'd polish his shoes and listen to a lecture about Dr. Cole's son, who was very brilliant and had a very high CGPA. He would tell me how Dr. Cole's son was studying computer engineering and how the boy polished shoes to earn some money. My father somehow saw honor in that, in the struggle to become a man, doing the lowliest of things for something higher. Title, My Failure Started in the Kitchen by Socrates Bamalu. This is the last piece in this story. And it's this arrangement that made me realize, or at least can make anybody reading this book see that these editors took their time to pick which story to put where. And for me, I saw this story as a fitting end. Socrates, I feel, actually Socrates, I keep saying Socrates. Socrates is he's not a serious writer, but not serious in the sense of, how can I even explain this? I don't have the words to explain what I mean by Socrates is serious. Socrates works very hard. He writes a lot. He has articles published in Al Jazeera. He has articles published in This Is Africa. I think he's an editor in This Is Africa. Like, Socrates has had to fight to be a writer. He published a recent piece on the scar on his head. I think it was in Catapult, I believe. And I would see if I can find the links to some of those stories and put here. But if you do search Socrates in Bamalu, you will find his pieces online. They are available and he's been paid for his writing. Socrates, in this particular story, gives a very raw picture of the life he grew up in. And you can almost see why he is the way he is now based on these recollections from his own personal perspective. The thing about memory, I feel, since we're coming to the end and conclusion of the book, and the thing about memory is that you cannot trust your memory. I just saw a tweet, I don't know if it's a tweet or a Facebook post by Dami Ajayi, interestingly, who is one of the editors of this collection, where he was talking about the unreliable narrator. And he said basically that maybe that is the default. The unreliable narrator is basically is a voice when you write a story, someone who is telling you a story but who lets you know that they might not be recollecting it in the exact way in which it happened. And the argument like Dami was making, which I actually agree with, which I actually want to make right now, is how do we actually really know that what happened is what happened? How do we know that what we felt at that particular moment is what we are feeling right now? Say disappointment or loss or pain or heartbreak. We look back to those moments and we can either amplify it or reduce it to one specific instance, one specific emotion, or one specific series of events. When you read Adam's story about Grace, or Howard about tea, or Lucia, or Godwin's recollection of when he went to go and get the wood, or Caleb, how do you know that everything that you're writing is exactly as it happened? Socrates was asked, like, how do you feel about this? He said something in the panel that stayed with me, which was, your story is no longer just your story. And that's one thing I felt about reading this book and the collective effort of all these people behind this collection is these people, this piece of paper with these words are not just about these people here. It's not just about Lucia or Godwin or Howard or Caleb or Afope. Like, it's not just about these people. It's not just about Saraba. It's not just about Goethe Institute. It's not just about Safurat, who I believe was very instrumental in this particular conversation and who actually has, an introduction herself. I think on the panel, you will not hear Safurat speak. You will not hear her talk a lot. But I've been able to meet her a couple of times, actually once. And from the conversation I've had with Mac and seeing what has been able to happen with Saraba, there is a certain level of power that I feel exuding from these people. A quest of sorts. This book stands to be one of those pieces of literature that young writers from Cameroon and Nigeria should read and should know more about. Not just about the stories and how they feel and how they were written or the writers inside, but the whole process and how a couple of people, a handful of people, I think probably 5, like Dami Ajayi, Emmanuel Edoma, Safra Balogun, and Tekashu Magviban, there are probably other people behind the scenes here, but a couple of people sat and were like, we don't have many pieces from Cameroon and Nigeria. We don't have people talking about our stories, writing from a point of view that people think is new. Emmanuel Duma gives a really good introduction at the panel where he tries to clarify the whole idea that non-fiction is not as new as people think. Non-fiction has been existing for a very long time. And it's sad that as long as it has been around for, we have very few of such collections that capture the voices that are still existing. We don't have to wait for people to die before we publish their books. We don't have to wait for people to become old before we say they actually have what it takes to write good. Right. I can't even use my words anymore. Non-fiction from Cameroon and Nigeria, Limbe to Lagos, made me feel a sense of we are getting somewhere. We are making the steps and there are people behind this who are powerful and willing to do the work. I would not be surprised if every single one of these writers goes on to write a novel or a collection and becomes huge. Howard, for example, is already speaking at the Ake Festival this year. Zekashu Magviban, who is one of the editors, is just recently announced that Bakwa Books Series 9, Bakwa 9, will be published, had a paperback version of the collection. This is 2019. Next year is 2020. And I wonder, like, if we keep pushing the literary landscape forward, where do you think we're going to be in 2025? In my opinion, I think we're going to be somewhere really awesome. That was my review, such fanboy perspective of Limbe to Lagos, non-fiction from Cameroon and Nigeria. You cannot find it on Amazon yet. So this is where I need your help. Put in the comments section where you are and if you'd like to get the book, because I've been putting pressure on Mark and these people, like, find a way to get the book. It was collaboration with, if you look here carefully, you will see it from the Goethe Institute. And I think it's possible to get this probably in Germany, maybe in other places. And in Nigeria, you can get it from Mark himself. Links all in description. And you can buy it online in Cameroon. So if you're watching this from Cameroon and you want to get this, it's like 3,000 francs, I think, or 3,500. Dude, people go to IA and pay a meal for 3,500. With that same amount of money, you can get the handwork of people who want to tell African stories. So get the book if you're in Cameroon. If you're in Nigeria, get the book. And please, if you're not in any of these two countries, let me know in the comment section where you are, if you'd like to get the book, and let's find a way to get it. One more really cool announcement. I'll be doing a giveaway of the book some point in the future. So if you're in the US, stay tuned. If you're not in the US, I don't know, stay tuned. And I'll be doing that. So I really like the book. Apart from Godwin's story that I felt was not for me, every other story really resonated with me, and I still understand where the story was coming from. So it's like one story out of all these stories, I'm like, okay, this is not for me, but I still like, I read all the stories, like I didn't jump any stories, I read all the stories, I read them all in one sitting, and I read some stories more than 3 times. As you can imagine, I heard Howard's story a couple of times and Sada's story a couple of times as well. And I think it's a great collection. I don't have anything bad to say about this book, honestly. I don't have anything to say like, oh, don't get it, because I wish I did. Like, I really wish I had something terrible to say about the collection. I don't. And yeah, like this video if you like it, share it with the writers, and let me know what you think about this review. I want to do more of this. Is there any book that you think I should be doing a review of to tell you about how I feel about it? Did you like this review? I was worried about it because I was just very emotional about it, or I don't have any facts to support anything, because I think reading is not so much a data thing than an experience thing. And I experienced a lot of joy and emotions up, down while reading this book. And I hope that you will do the same. So subscribe on the channel if you haven't, and you can watch other videos here that I made. Pick up a copy of Limbe to Lagos. I'll see you in the next video.